It's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Clark Howard Show. You know, our mission is to serve you with advice and information that empowers you so you make better financial decisions in your life. And today I'm going to address something that's costing so many of us so much money. Insurance claim denials or improper bills. We're going to talk about both of those. And also, all across America, these ratcheting up power bills because of the data centers. And what, from a public policy standpoint, what should be going on? And then second, what can you do in your own life to deal with these rising bills? We'll talk about those two things. What should the politicians be doing to protect us? And then second, what can we do to protect ourselves? All right. Claims from medical are crazy. I mean, just crazy. You get a bill and an insurer says, we ain't paying. Or you have a hospitalization and the bill is like crazy. All right. I want to emphasize both of these things are happening to us as consumers. Nobody in medicine looks at you and me as consumers, by the way. We're just like cannon fodder. But the reality is we are customers, even though the insurers don't think of us that way and the hospitals don't think of us that way. So you got to know how to assert your rights, your power. I want to repeat something that I've said over time, that if you've not heard it, you need to hear it. If you've heard it and you didn't act on it, you need to know. Insurers, possibly as a strategy, deny payments even if they should be paying for something. United Healthcare, which has got such a microscope on it, says that they are coming up with new standards to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. Don't hold your breath. But the thing is, it's not just United Healthcare, even though they've got such a focus on them. This is a clear strategy of health insurers to deny valid claims. And you don't just take it. Most people do. Only a tiny percent of people, depending on whose report you believe, a couple of percent of people ever appeal a denial from a health insurer after services are rendered or deny approving something up front. Or they slow walk it. So it's up to you to use the appeal system that's available to you. And that's all I want to say about that right now, because I've said that many times. Because overwhelmingly, when you do appeal, particularly after the fact, you win. Data is clear on that. All right, now let's talk about something else. The bill you get from being in a hospital, the bill you get is going to be a summary bill. And if it's a big whopping number, always require the hospital to provide you with the full itemized bill, even if it's 150 pages. I mentioned recently that someone used AI to go through one of those zillion-page bills and reduce their bill by over 80% because there was all kinds of stuff that never happened to them on there, and AI was able to detect all the phony billing that was on there. Now, would a hospital system, just as a strategy, pad a bill with all kinds of things that never happened? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think it's just that that's an area that medical has always been bad at, is detailed billing and getting it right. So you just don't pay a bill without examining it. And the more you do that, the more, what I'm really trying to say to you is you need to be an effective advocate for yourself. You need to do that. You don't know how you got one of those long medical bills and you don't know how to use AI? Well, you probably have a kid or a relative or a friend's kid who can take it and use an AI assistant and go, boom, like right on my computer. I'm looking on here. I've got Gemini on the screen right here, which is Google's version of an AI assistant. And I can click on it and have it do stuff right from here. I can load text from something into it. I could load that bill into it and tell it, hey, analyze this bill for me. And if it's not your thing, I'm having a lot of fun, by the way, using AI assistants. If that's not your thing, you find the friend or family member or family member's kid or friend's kid who can do it for you because it's your money. Yeah, maybe you've only got the patient responsibility portion, but if you've had a major hospitalization, that's going to be a big number, and you want to protect your wallet. Again, the insurance companies, maybe they've been doing it as a strategy. The hospitals, I don't think so much. And I could be wrong on that. But the effect is the same. Your money's at risk. Krista?
Hey, Steve in Washington says, I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer and told it's low risk. I'm 57 years old. My urologist recommended I have the biopsy and MRI results sent to another lab for further specialized results called a Decipher test. They use a process they call microdissection. My insurance company sent me a letter stating this lab had used coding for this that they deem as investigative and therefore will not cover it since it's not approved by the FDA. Without insurance, the cost is $5,500. I called the lab and they said it's the only code they can use and suggested I start an appeal with the insurer and contact my urologist to send my details for the appeal. I did that, and the clinic has sent their notes and findings on my diagnosis for the appeal. I'm waiting to hear back to see if they'll allow any coverage for it. If they deny, is there anything else I can do? Since I do have cancer, it doesn't seem right that I should have to pay this full amount without any help from insurance. Since you've had some experience, I would love to hear your thoughts on the next steps. Thank you, and hopefully mine will stay low risk as long as yours has.
Yeah, so Steve, first of all, if yours has been gauge low risk, that's fantastic. If you're not aware, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, 17 years ago. And mine has never done anything. I go for a test every year. It's an MRI, a sophisticated MRI. And the last 3 years, it hadn't even found cancer present anymore. I've been on a few medicines that apparently have had the effect of shrinking the tumors into oblivion. There are a very large percent of men who get a diagnosis of prostate cancer that it's very serious and it must be treated all hands on deck. There's also a very meaningful percent that's somewhere maybe around 40% that only need proper monitoring and may not ever need treatment. The hard part is knowing which you're in. And I recommend to any man who is diagnosed with prostate cancer or is worried about it, or family members, go to the website of the Prostate Cancer Foundation, pcf.org, and read the information for patients who are receiving a new diagnosis to know the various strategies and steps. And I would recommend to you, I don't know that they normally do this, Steve, but I'd recommend you reach out to the Prostate Cancer Foundation and find out if they have information on the specific Decipher test you had, and do they consider it based on their expertise to be experimental in any way, and having an expert opinion from them might be very helpful to you dealing with insurance. There's a lot of newer developments in the diagnosis, care, and treatment of prostate cancer, and I recommend that you be in charge of your own care as a patient, not tell the doctor what to do, but do the proper research for what you do next in the event you hear those scary words, cancer. That's a word. It's a single word.
You have.
You hear what's that?
You have cancer.
I have cancer.
Words.
Yeah. So this is one that requires, it's different than a lot of other cancers, in that it requires that you be a good patient advocate for yourself, family members being good about it as well, because it is both a very dangerous cancer potentially, but it's also the most overtreated cancer there is in the country. I hope that you're able to get the kind of help you need, including from potentially your state insurance department on payment for this, because insurance is regulated by the states, and if this insurer is failing to act in good faith, one of the levers you can push is filing a complaint potentially with your state insurance department.
John,
and I hope that yours is as luckily not dangerous as mine has been.
John in Oklahoma says, I recently had an outpatient surgery and knew the amount I would owe before it. They ran my insurance and everything seemed fine. Then, about 2 to 3 weeks out, the doctor's nurse said I had to pay a $300 deposit directly to the doctor's office. There wasn't an invoice or a way to pay online. It's been well over 6 weeks, and it never showed up on my insurance portal. I had a follow-up not too long ago and asked the nurse when I would see the charge show up on my insurance portal and go toward my out-of-pocket max. And she said it won't show up on my EOB, my explanation of benefits, and left it at that. I'm a little confused.
I am
this
too.
normal? Is this even legal or ethical? I've never had this happen before, and I don't understand how or why a doctor would have a charge that doesn't go toward your deductible or out-of-pocket maximum.
Yeah, I am totally puzzled. I have no idea if this is the doctor basically having a separate charge that would not count against insurance for the doctor to make additional revenue. I mean, I have no idea at all. And if you're not getting a clear answer on this, I would send a friendly letter, to the doctor himself or herself, and say, what was my $300 for? Nobody in your office has been able to give me an answer, and I'd like to know what this additional charge is for, because it's not shown up as a payment towards my care on my insurance payment, on my insurance paperwork, and I need to know what's up here. In other words, very polite, inquisitive letter, not in any way threatening. You're asking questions directly to the doctor. There is one other step if it gets to be a tussle, and that is in most states you can file a complaint about the billing with the state affiliate of the American Medical Association. Many states have fee panels that hear disputes about patient costs between the doctor and the patient.
Stephanie in Texas says, can you explain a little about managing a minor's credit? I received a notice that my and my 5-year-old's information was compromised through our health insurance company. I have had my own credit frozen, but I've never checked or frozen his. I've looked into this since receiving the notice, but it seems like a daunting process to pull his credit and freeze it, including sending all his private documents through the mail. What do you suggest I do to keep his information secure?
Stephanie, don't hate me, but that terrible, terrible process that Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian have put in place to make your life miserable when you try to freeze a minor's credit is worth doing, especially in the case of your 5-year-old, because knowing that his information is out there, you need to do so. And you've got to send all kinds of documentation proving your relationship to your child and everything else that are a bunch of sensitive private documents through the mail. And it's actually worth it in this case to get that credit frozen, because child identity theft is amazingly common. And now that your child's information is vulnerable from hackers, it's worth doing. And if you don't mind, after you've been through all the hassle with the 3 credit bureaus, I'd love to know how much effort it took, and if it took more than once with any of the 3 credit bureaus to get the freeze in place for your 5-year-old. Coming up ahead, I want to talk about the train wreck to our power bills from the big AI power centers and what should be happening about that, and how do you protect yourself as best you can. The huge increases that we're seeing with power around the country because of the building and expansion of these huge AI data centers is totally out of line. You and me as consumers, as business owners, should not be subsidizing the power needed for these data centers. Unfortunately, these big technology companies in the race for dominance in AI are really politically powerful, spread a lot of money around Washington and around state capitals. And the truth is that the cost of the expansion of available power, specifically for these data centers, should not be passed on to you and me. It is a special interest passing a cost on to the general public and to business owners. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And it's not like the big technology companies building these data centers aren't loaded with money. They are. And so they should be paying their own way. And there will be states where that happens, others that it doesn't. I mean, the easiest answer is this is all about peak load demand. And we have plenty of power normally. We have lots of standby capability around the country. But during peak periods, particularly of extreme heat in the summer, the grid is not big enough in places where these big data centers are being built to handle the demand. So what utilities are doing is they're petitioning state regulators to be able to dramatically increase the standby capability for power for the few hours a year when the demand being created by these power centers collides with the very strong amount of energy needed on a very hot day. And the answer is very simple, that the AI data centers lose access to available power on those peak times. And then the rest of us don't have to pay these huge bills. And what would happen then, if for these data centers it's really that important to have power available all the time, they would build their own microgrid for their facility. They'd use solar, they'd use battery backups. The cost should be borne by them, not by you and me. In a lot of states, regular people don't have voices. Small business owners don't have voices. The politicians only listen to people like these big companies. So whether we like it or not, this cost burden is going to be passed on to you and me. So what weapons do we have? Let me tell you first, the very batteries I was just talking about. The cost of having a battery supply for peak demand times, if you're a homeowner in your own garage, the cost of that's fallen 90% in the last 10 years. And you can put batteries that will provide you power during peak times. And I know solar is really out for some reason in the United States, but there are many of us who live in climates, particularly in the South and the West, where there's a great advantage to you with these power rates going up to install your own solar panels with the battery backup. You don't de-grid, but you really reduce the impact that power is going to have on you. What if you're a renter? What if you're someone who can't afford the kind of things I'm talking about? I've talked year after year, both as we head into winter and when we come out spring going towards summer, I've talked about all the things you can do that are low cost to lower your energy bills in your home. And I won't belabor that again, but this is a thing where you don't want to be a sitting duck. You want to be someone who sees the problem coming. You can't control, so you control what you can. And the cost of solar panels, the actual panel themselves, has fallen 95% over, I think it's the last 14 years. And so cases where solar made no sense before, it makes a lot of sense now. It saves you tons of dollars with a really good cycle of payback. Hard part, I can't gloss over this, finding a solar installation company that knows what it's doing, is reliable, dependable, and ethical. That's the hard part. Krista?
Okay, Jeff in Pennsylvania wrote in with this. My wife and I bought a stock in a company called this that has developed a very efficient way of extracting lithium. I recently read an article about Mercedes manufacturing an electric vehicle with a solid-state battery, i.e. non-lithium. It actually runs hundreds of miles. Example given was a trip from Pennsylvania to Florida without a recharge. That worries me. Is this going to replace all the lithium batteries and sink companies similar to this one?
Jeff, the short answer is nobody knows. Several of the automakers, and Toyota's been one of them, been spending huge amounts of money in research and development to develop a very reliable, low-cost, solid-state battery. And that's considered to be like a real nirvana coming for electric vehicles. There's also, and by the way, the world is moving very heavily to electric vehicles, even though we're not in the United States. So this is a big issue around the world. Others are trying to develop batteries that aren't necessarily solid state, but will not need the amount of lithium that batteries have needed to date. So when you bet on a company that's having a way to efficiently extract lithium, you don't know. This is such a quickly developing area. That's why it's great for you to have an investment in it, but don't bet the farm on it, because it's just too hard to know where battery technology is going to go and what the role of lithium is going to be in that as part of that process as batteries continue to morph. So this is not one where you take every penny you got and you throw it at this. This is not like going to Vegas and setting a really high return bet that has a low potential for payoff. You need to be very cautious how much you put into one particular company coming up with one method of efficiently extracting lithium.
Allison in California says, for 2026, Ring announced a steep price increase in their services. To use their products, a consumer will owe them $99.99 annually, so $100. To have the system professionally monitored, the consumer will owe another $100 annually. For the steep price increase, there is no additional service being offered. How can they justify the price increase? The excuse of tariffs is not applicable. Is
Right.
there an alternative, less expensive option on the market to consider?
Okay, so Ring is owned by Amazon. And Amazon was subsidizing this very heavily. And they were offering the cheapest monitoring pretty much anybody offers for professional monitoring. The market price for monitoring is far higher, and Amazon has made a corporate decision that a lot of the Amazon electronics that they were doing electronics of all different kinds, the tablets and the cameras and all these different things, the doorbells. Amazon has decided they don't want to lose money in those things anymore. So they've discontinued a lot of products, and now the product categories have to pay their own way, which they've not. Amazon's just been willing to throw money at this year after year. So doing it so radically all at once is ugly. The reality is the monitoring cost that Amazon is offering, even at the new much higher price, is still much, much lower than the marketplace prices for monitoring a security system professionally. So now if you pay the $200 a year, you're paying, is it $17 a month? Is that 200 divided by 12? Something like in that range. And so Amazon was really being Santa Claus, and now they've decided they don't want to be Santa Claus anymore.
Tim in Indiana says, I've recently started becoming much more excited about finance and furthering what my money can do for my life. Your podcast has been very helpful in educating me and helping me grow in this journey.
Thank
My
you.
employer HSA is through one of the big companies paying 0.03% interest on a checking account and with a $2,100 minimum before any money can be invested, at which point only the amount above $2,000 can be invested. They charge a $20 outbound transfer to an account like Fidelity's personal HSA option. Please let me know if and when it makes sense from an account balance standpoint to transfer the money to Fidelity on a recurring basis. Also, if you can put something out there for my employers and all others who are out there to convince them to evaluate better HSA options, that would be amazing.
All right, so this HSA administrator is owned by one of the nation's largest health insurers. And the employer, I'm just supposing here, does their health insurance and pharmacy benefits plan through this health insurer, and they just tack on the atrocious HSA plan that this health insurer offers. This is something that should be of interest to the bosses because they're paying all these junk fees as well to this terrible HSA administrator. The outbound transfer fee is outrageous. It forces you to wait till you have a decent amount of money and transfer a lump sum at a time. But you're playing a long ball game here. And so you want to, like the Fidelity example you gave, where the administrative costs are like nothing. And what an insult to all the employees to pay 0.03% interest on the money in an HSA. I mean, just atrocious. And so the employer, I don't know how large a company, if you can talk to one of the bosses, or if it's a huge corporate entity and it's just a giant bureaucracy, I don't know how you move the needle on it, other than at a big company, you'd want to send a nice note to the head of HR and say, hey, by the way, the HSA we have is really not great for the employees. Can I make suggestions of other plans that would be better? But the best thing for you is once you've accumulated a couple of grand, then you pay the $20 fee and get it out of this company's hands into Fidelity or another ultra low cost provider. I don't have a better answer yet, because remember, the employer is the customer to this terrible HSA administrator. You're not. And the employer's only trying to hold down their costs for administering the HSA plan, and the costs are instead being shouldered by you as their employee. Not very employee friendly, I would say. Anyway, that's a downer note to end this podcast today and YouTube show. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today on this one. And coming up on Friday, our next edition of Clark Stinks. And I hope you tune in for that on Friday. And speaking of tuning in, you may live in one of the cities where you can see me on local television news or hear me on radio. You can follow us on social media, pretty much every form of social media. We have YouTube shorts that we post virtually every day on, obviously, YouTube. And we serve you online at clark.com and clarkdeals.com. And we have our daily newsletters that are free, available to you. If you go to clark.com/newsletters, you'll see what we have available to you, opening up in your email in basket, or whatever you call it, each and every day. And have a wonderful week of empowerment, and we will be at your service on Friday.